The Denver Nuggets have hired David Adelman as their head coach for the future, and to me, this just screams that Mike Malone was usurped in that locker room. There have been a ton of things that point me to this conclusion, but number one is the drama that went down, according to all of the reporting, about Mike Malone and the front office. The front office had drafted a bunch of young players like Peyton Watson, and Mike Malone was not playing them, especially later into the season. He was leaning on veterans, getting ready for a playoff push. And the front office did not like that. Them and Mike Malone got into screaming matches, and that, to me, shows the absolute chaos that was going on behind the scenes in this Nuggets front office and coaching staff. But here's the thing that I want to talk about. The ownership did not side with either or. They sided with one assistant head coach. They fired Mike Malone. They fired the GM. The entire front office is in an overhaul. The coaching staff is in an overhaul. But yet, an assistant head coach was able to stick around, become the interim, in my opinion, be kind of successful. He won a first-round playoff matchup versus the Clippers, I think. And then he lost in the second round and gets rewarded with the head coaching position of the Denver Nuggets. All of that doesn't happen without the approval of Nikola Jokic, who a lot of people say is very nonchalant and doesn't really care about basketball. But I could promise you this. Jokic wants to win. He's getting paid all this money, and he has to leave his home. He better come and win a championship. I think that's his mindset. And so no basketball decisions with the Nuggets organization, especially in the coaching staff, goes without talking to Jokic first. And so this screams to me that somebody got in either his ear or the ownership's ear and turned the entire roster on Mike Malone. If you remember a few years ago when the Nuggets won their championship, the Jokic brothers came down to the court and picked up Mike Malone on their shoulders and threw him around because of how much they loved him. And so now for Mike Malone to be fired and talk about SGA being the MVP and then having to backtrack that, it smells like blood in the water. That means to me that this Nuggets organization has a lot more going on than is being reported. The front office gets fired, Mike Malone gets fired, and he even hinted kind of that he had lost the locker room in a loss after the Portland Trailblazers. I believe he gets into the press conference, and he talks about the fact that players aren't really trying that hard. They're not listening to him. They're not watching film. They don't seem motivated. That doesn't happen with a contending playoff team. This is a playoff team that has made the playoffs consistently for 7 or 8 years now. Jokic has won multiple MVPs. You don't see this kind of drama with the Kansas City Chiefs or the Golden State Warriors. But yet, Mike Malone has been fired. David Adelman, the assistant head coach to him, has been hired as the full-time head coach. I truly believe that this has to do with somebody getting in Jokic's ear and turning him off of Mike Malone. Either that or the ownership got completely fed up with the antics of Mike Malone not playing the young players, the front office screaming down at Mike Malone for not playing the young players. I don't know. It seems very interesting. There were also reports that came out about Russell Westbrook not being very well liked in that locker room. Now, I don't necessarily think that's true, but for a team that is supposed to be so put together, a team that has such a quiet star in Jokic, you don't see him in the media. He doesn't do that many commercials. He's not on NBA ESPN. He's not on First Take. For a guy that's so quiet, there seems to be so much drama. And maybe that's the issue. Jokic is not a traditional quote-unquote American leader. I'm not disrespecting his heritage or his background or anything like that. I'm saying when you look at some of the dynasties in the league, you have guys like Tim Duncan, who is quiet, but yet a leader and a championship winner. You have LeBron James, Stephen Curry. You have Michael Jordan. A lot of these guys have been American born, and maybe that's a disconnect in the Nuggets locker room. Jokic is not connecting like a prototypical leader should. Once again, I'm not pointing at anything that I believe. I'm just throwing out a lot of possibilities that could be in the air. And so if you don't have a traditional leader who speaks his mind vocally, maybe you have other players stepping up that usually wouldn't. Maybe a Russell Westbrook, an Aaron Gordon, a Jamal Murray, maybe even a Christian Braun, who has been a very key role player for this team and somebody that the Nuggets want to build around going forward. You never know. There has to be more reporting on what went down with Mike Malone. I believe it will be released by ESPN, considering that Malone now works for ESPN. But for somebody that a lot of people, critics, fans, pundits would consider a top 10 head coach in the league, this just screams toxicity. Very similar to what went down with Mike Vrabel and the Tennessee Titans. The consensus with the league, the NFL, would be that Mike Vrabel was a top 10 head coach, and he didn't have a job last year. That, to me, is insanity and points to a bigger problem behind the scenes that nobody really got to talk about. I think the exact same thing is going on with Mike Malone here. It seems to me that something changed in that Nuggets locker room this season, and it bled into everything. And now the front office is gone. They're making a new head coaching staff, except for the head coach that was a part of all of this. That is my question. Why is he the exception to the rule when looking at the rest of this situation? And to me, that has to do with either him or somebody else being influential in either the locker room or ownership. And so that's going to do it for this episode. Thank you guys so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.